Good morning and welcome back to another episode of UFL Central, where we talk about the United Football League, of course, in case you weren't prepared for what the UFL is. We've got a lot to talk about today, including the announcement of the championship location. We're going to talk a little bit about the Oklahoma expansion announcement because we were not here for a couple weeks as far as the show goes. We'll also talk about some of the news revolving around these veterans that have come out and started to say that they're being blackballed. And then we'll also review the past week's games, or not this past week's games, but the games that have already happened. We'll also preview the games coming up before our next episode. So without further ado, we're going to hit a quick intro video, and we'll get right into the show. All right, before we get going, how you guys doing this morning, Michael?
I'm glad to be back, man. Had a few weeks there where I was busy and didn't get a chance to get on, so I'm ready to talk some UFL. And yeah, that's about it, man.
Absolutely.
But I'm good. I'm good. So.
Absolutely. Very glad to be back with you as well. It's been a little bit since we've had, all of us here, so very excited. Wish Travis was joining us, but that's all right. We'll get him back next week, hopefully. TJ, how you doing this morning, man?
Hey man, doing pretty good. Suffering my first storm loss last night, but other than that, hey, it had to happen at some point. So
Exactly, and they're doing pretty well, 4-1. I think Anthony Beck is probably pretty excited about their record at the moment. So at that point, we're going to open it up with the discussion about the announcement that the UFL has decided where the championship game will take place this year. And Michael, you're kind of our resident DC Defenders fan, not championship fan. And it has been announced that they're going to have the championship game there in Washington, D.C. So with that being said, what were your thoughts when you first heard this announcement from the UFL?
I thought it was brilliant because they've done the dome, I think the last 2 years, and it's good to kind of move the championship game around, especially with DC Defenders fans last year. They traveled pretty decently to St. Louis, and it gives them a chance to possibly see their team at home win the championship. Honestly, the UFL is in an interesting situation where I'm not sure neutral field championship games is necessary at this point. I'm glad that they're doing it because it's bringing it gives an opportunity and chance to bring fans to there from the other opposing team or whatever it may be, or the opposing teams in this situation. But at the same time, I feel like it may be more beneficial to actually just put the championship game in whoever the higher seed is, or whoever has the better record in the championship game, at least this early in, because I mean, let's face it, what is this, year 5, year 4 of the UFL? So you're in a situation where you're not established necessarily that these fans are going to travel. Like, you take a look at places like Dallas and Birmingham, Orlando, in cases, like they're not bringing in a ton of, or Houston, not Birmingham. Birmingham actually showing up, but Houston, they're not bringing out fans in a certain sense. So I feel like maybe if you were to say, okay, the championship game is going to be in whoever has the best record in the game, those fans may out a little bit more because they may want to see the team that they may follow on a casual level win a championship. So I'm excited about it for DC because I feel like DC has a good chance to get back to the game. I'm excited for Audi Field because I like the venue, and I think the venue is a good size. It's 20K. You may sell it out, you may not, but it's going to look good on TV. It's just, I kind of wish, part of me wishes that they kind of just put the championship game in whoever was at the best record at that point. But I get it. Neutral field is how most championship games have always been played, and you don't want one team to have necessarily a home field advantage. But at the same time, I feel like a league this young, because let's face it, it's still in its infancy, even though it's having a good year, and it looks like ownership is finally paying attention and fairly stable. But it doesn't sit right with me necessarily, and I've thought this from the start. But I'm glad they moved away from the Dome just to kind of give another venue an opportunity and chance. So I'm excited for Audi Field. I'm excited for DC, and hopefully, my Defenders are there so the DC fans can see them repeat as champions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you made some great points there, but before I get to them, I'll let TJ give his thoughts on this. TJ, what are your thoughts on the announcement of DC, but also Michael's thoughts on the potential of potentially giving the highest seed team the championship?
Yeah, I mean it's something that we always talk about, especially coming from arena and indoor football. Some leagues do neutral, others do best record, home field advantage for the championship. It really is, for me, it's always cool to have a neutral site because number one, you can plan ahead, you can have people go. Now, to Michael's point, UFL still being on the younger side, how many casual random fans are you going to have fly out to see that, especially if their team's not even in it? Whereas if it was, say their team highest record, they were there, obviously they'd be going down the street to go to the game. But I mean, I personally like neutral site games. It gives time to plan, it gives time to organize and stuff like that. I feel like it's a better show out. I do love Audi Field. I think it's the perfect size. It's exactly what the UFL is going for. They're going for smaller, kind of soccer-based stadiums, and DC was kind of like the prototype of that, if you will. I'm also looking forward to seeing how big of whether the championship's on Saturday or Sunday, whether it's a Super Saturday or Super Sunday snake. I want to see how big that cup can get. Those cups can get. So it's going to be fun, especially if DC makes it. And ironically, they are like the best team right now in the UFL, up towards the top. So, I mean, you could also see a home field either way, but I personally like it. And I like Audi Stadium, and I think neutral personally is just the way to go.
Yeah, I definitely think from a logistics perspective, there's some merit to doing the neutral site location, right? Obviously, like you said, from a planning perspective, you get a jump on where you're going location wise. Also, the thing that we never really think about as fans is if you give the highest seed a home championship game, logistically, you have to have 8 different venues prepared to host that championship game at any moment, right? So that means you're holding dates in 8 locations in order to be able to play that home championship game, which can be tough, when you're a league that has to foot the bill for all of that, or write it into a contract for a lease agreement for a stadium. So that's something that really, honestly, I had not thought a lot about until very recently. So it's something that, while I would love to see the highest seeded team host the championship game, it's tough logistically for a league to do that. So I do wonder if it would be better for them to do it that way, have the top seed team host, just to see how the crowd would end up being. But at the same time, I understand the logistics side of it as well. But any more thoughts on that before we move on to our next subject?
No, that's a fair point. That's a fair point as far as the logistics is concerned from a league perspective. It just, my thought process is if you're trying to maximize the crowd and the fans, like you might have your casual fans who know that the team exists and kind of follow it, but they may not necessarily go to the games. But if there is a championship game that's fairly affordable, you might be able to pick up the phone and be like, okay, I can spend $60-$70 on a ticket and go, watch my team play in a championship game. So that's kind of where I was going with it more than that. But from a league perspective and a logistics side, I can understand not wanting to hold 8 dates for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Honestly, to your credit, I think at this level, like you said, in this age of the league, when it's fairly new, you're still growing a fan base. I think there's a lot to be said about having the highest seed team host that championship game, because like you said, you're probably going to get a lot more fans of that team into the game. So it's going to have an effect twofold, because you might have a good audience because of the team being there, but then also you might also turn some of those casual Stallions or Defenders fans or whatever team it may be into long-term fans that go out and consider buying a season ticket the next season or something like that. So definitely some thought that should be put into that idea, honestly. And that's something that we've talked about when it comes to indoor and arena football heavily. We've had many leagues, move away from that top seeded team hosting, and it's kind of affected them in terms of the attendance as well. So if you happen to be watching, let us know your thoughts in the chat and answer our little poll here next to me. What would you think about the UFL moving to a different championship method and focusing on the top seeded team having a home game? But we're going to go ahead and move on, and let's talk some quarterback trades. There were basically a flurry of quarterback trades, including DTR went to Birmingham and took over the starting job there. Matt Corral, I believe, went to, I'm blanking the team name off the top of my head. Is it Orlando?
Orlando.
Thank you.
I want to say Orlando.
Let me pull up the transactions real quick before I misspeak again. But we also had Luis Perez got traded. DTR got traded. Matt Corral got traded. There was one more guy. Jason Bean. Jason Bean also got traded. So lots of quarterback movements. While I pull up the transactions so we have them all correct on screen here, what are your thoughts on some of these trades, TJ?
Well, first off, it really surprised me. Not surprised me, but you could see it coming. But Luis Perez, the Spring King, kind of getting moved around in recent weeks. That kind of surprised me. I thought he was going to be a renegade till the end after back in the day from the Vipers, but ultimately, they have a new quarterback. He's lighting it up, so he ended up moving. So that's going to be a little bit of a different look. DTR, he came in. Birmingham still has some kinks to work out and stuff, but he came in, he showed out. Had a couple picks, but also had a lot of bright sides. Threw for a lot of yards, hit a lot of guys on a dime. So he did really good. I look for Birmingham to really start to probably get cranking on points and stuff in the upcoming weeks, possibly just in time for maybe an end of the season playoff push.
Fair point. A fair point. Now, I guess I didn't really connect the dots when I heard the initial trade for Jason Bean, but I didn't realize that was the DC Defenders and Louisville Kings that made that trade, and that Jason Bean's going to go be the backup for Jordan Teamu. That's, man, can you imagine having that depth in the UFL? Jordan Teamu is your starter and Bean is the backup. Like, that coaching staff has to feel pretty good about their quarterback room right now. Not that they felt bad about it before, with DeLeo there, or DeLeo. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. Thank you. DeLilo. There you go. But at the same point, like, acquiring Jason Bean there as a backup is big move. But obviously the Stallions acquired Dorian Thompson-Robinson in exchange for Matt Corral, and they also sent Amani Bledsoe to the Storm. And then, as mentioned, Luis Perez went from the Dallas Renegades to the St. Louis Battlehawks, and the Renegades acquired tackle Corey Stewart in exchange. So same question for you, Michael. Which one of these trades do you really look to as like the most impactful? And what were your thoughts when you saw all of these trades kind of happen in like a week time there?
Well, to be honest with you, the most impactful is already the Orlando Storm trade, because Amani Bledsoe had an interception last night. So he's already made he's already made a name for himself. With the Storm, they didn't know who he was probably beforehand, but they do know who he is now. Honestly, this looks like it was just kind of one of those situations where teams are still trying to figure out their identity. I think this is the downfall, the one downfall of having a centralized GM and like a month only of camp, and the rosters change over so much. Like Matt Corral, yes, he was with Birmingham and he had good success, but it's a whole new staff now. There was no guarantees that the AJ McCarron staff it was going to work out, which he didn't play very well. Maybe the offense was just, it changed too much for him. DTR was a backup in Orlando, which I thought was odd because I'm not a big Jack Plummer fan. But, with the way Plummer played last night, there's a chance that Corral may see the field if he catches the offense over there. That's the one downfall, I think, of the centralized, GM of sorts with this league. I understand why they did it and why they do it, and it makes sense for a league this young. But Jason Bean getting traded, I was surprised that the Kings, I'm sure the coaches have a say in this, so I was a little bit surprised that Chris Redmond was so willing to depart with Bean, because I don't know if there's anybody else necessarily on that roster that is as athletic as him. I mean, maybe I'm wrong in trying to think of it. Mike DeLeo has been around for a little bit, so maybe they just wanted to kind of get a guy who has a little bit of a spring feel because he is a little bit more of a veteran on the spring side. I'm not really sure what the thought process was there for trading Bean, because I didn't think Bean looked bad at all by any means. So getting the depth behind him with Jordan Tiamu, I enjoy. And Bean plays closer to Tiamu than DeLeo does. So maybe that was the thought process with DC making the trade, try to get a guy that's a little closer to who Tiamu is. And now Bean gets to learn from under Tiamu, who's also a spring veteran and has been around for a little bit. So the biggest impact, though, is it will probably end up being the Amani Bledsoe trade with Orlando and Birmingham, because DTR is going to, probably be the starter moving forward for Birmingham. And, Bledsoe's already made a name for himself. And if Plummer continues to struggle like he did last night, there's a good chance we could see Corral moving forward. So that's probably going to be the biggest trade out of the bunch here. Luis Perez getting traded obviously is unfortunate for Renegades fans because he's been around forever. But, we discussed a little bit earlier that we feel that Luis might be a little overhyped as a whole. And now you're starting to see more talent come into the UFL that is younger and at a higher level, like Austin Reed. So,
Agreed.
It likely was going to happen. But for St. Louis, it makes sense too, because now you have a backup that is a veteran and a guy who can come in and start for you and win games if you need him to. So
right.
It made sense for St. Louis to make that trade as well. So I don't think any of the trades were bad. They all make sense on the surface level. It's just, you could tell that these are league-initiated trades more than anything. So,
That was my immediate thought when the trades happened, too. It was like the league got together and they're like, crap, we've got Luis Perez on the bench. Jason Bean is, not really liking losing here in Louisville or whatever the reason may have been there. And, DTR is on the bench over here in Orlando. Like, we got to figure this out. And they just like, okay, DTR is going to Birmingham. Luis Perez, you're going to go to St. Louis because we think Frost may or may not get benched at some point. Like, it kind of makes a lot of sense, when you look at it from a whole. The one move that, like you said as well, didn't make a ton of sense to me was the Jason Bean move. I didn't think he was playing bad. I thought, honestly, he made a lot of sense as a starter there in Louisville. I also thought that, like, the league wanted him to be a starter. So moving him over to DC, that didn't really make a lot of sense to me. So we'll see what happens there. But other than that, the rest of the moves, I mean, they perfectly reasonable. I don't think Matt Corral was lighting the world on fire, and I don't think anybody's upset that they moved him to Orlando to be a backup. And DTR, I think a lot of people were curious what he could do in the UFL. So I think that move makes a lot of sense as well. So, to your guys' credit, I think both of you guys hit the nail on the head there that, a lot of these moves, on the surface level make a lot of sense. But we'll go ahead and transition to another topic. There's been a lot to talk about in the last 2 weeks since we've had a show. So let me get the document pulled back up. This is kind of a brief topic. We don't really have to spend a ton of time on this, but Kenny Robinson has retired from football. The reason I put this on the list, if you're a spring football fan, the name Kenny Robinson. Of course, he was a guy who opted to play in the XFL in 2020. during his rookie season prior to being eligible for the 2020 NFL draft, which he was selected in by Carolina in, I think, the 5th round at the time. So he became the first player, to my knowledge, in the modern kind of spring football era to be drafted out of one of these leagues. So kind of a big day for some of us spring football fans who have followed him along, or, followed along with his career since 2020. So kind of unfortunate to see him have to retire due to injuries. Obviously, that's the only reason this happens mid-season. And he was placed on injured reserve, I believe, just a week or two before this announcement. So, congratulations to Kenny Robinson on a good career. I'm sure this is not how he wanted to see it end, but my heart goes out to the guy for how it's kind of all fallen for him. Was a pretty inspiring story when he first started get going. But the big piece of news that we really needed to get to, and I think I'll save it for right now, is the players getting blackballed. So I'm sure both of you guys have seen this news kind of going around. I believe Frank Ginda. I saw Channing Stribling chimed in for a little bit. Brock Miller, Ricky Person. There was at least 5 or 6 different players that had said something to the effect of a GM or a coach wants to sign me, however, the league is not allowing it. So I wanted to pose this question to you guys. First of all, do you think that's accurate? Do you think the league is actually preventing these guys from being signed? Or do you think it's a situation where there is an extenuating circumstance in maybe each of these cases as to why these guys aren't being signed? Let's go to TJ first on this one.
I mean, you look at how the UFL is operating now. If they are a good player, if you think they will draw fans, if you think they will draw any attention, they will get signed. It doesn't matter how old or young they are, in my opinion. I feel like there had to be some kind of, maybe extra circumstance, or maybe there was concern, maybe they wouldn't pass, a physical or something like that. So they didn't want to waste the time, effort, money on that. But I feel like if any player, regardless of age, can come out and ball out and get any extra eyes on the league, they're going to sign them and at least give them, a couple weeks. If they absolutely, for some reason, wouldn't like somebody, they'd figure out a reason to get rid of them or put them on the bench and have them disappear. But I don't think it's specifically the league blackballing players per se. I would say it had to be something extra going on. Because again, if anything that can get the league any extra attention, any extra revenue, they will not turn it away at this point. I feel like it might be blown out of proportion, but who knows? I'm not in the room with them, right?
Fair point. Michael, same question to you. I mean, do you think there's any legitimacy to some of these claims?
It's hard because you don't want to discredit players' experiences and you don't want to take what they're going through necessarily away from them, or, accuse them or insinuate that they're fabricating anything along those lines. And I think in this situation, though, if you take a look at the league, you take a look at the UFL, the way that it's done, the guys that have chimed in on being blackballed, outside of hardcore spring football fans, how many of them are names that people are going to recognize? Like Frank Ginda is probably the biggest one out of the ones that has come forward. And I don't even know if you walked up to a random person on the street that watches football, if you ask them if they knew who Luis Perez is or Frank Ginda is, they're going to probably mention Luis Perez because his story has been blasted everywhere, even during the NFL season. So I feel like this is the league, without having any connections inside the league and the runnings of how they go about player allocation. I feel like this is the league basically saying that if you're a veteran and you don't have a quote unquote name power of some sort, we are going to give the chance to the younger undrafted guys. Because if you take a look at a lot of the players that are talking, they're all close to 30, over 30, pushing 30, in that range, or have been around for a little bit in the spring football world. But then you look at the flip side of this. Last night, there was a defensive tackle, I think, for Orlando that got hurt. I can't think of his name right now. He's 29 years old. Like, he's in the league. Luis Perez, has been around for a while. Hakeem Butler, Jordan Tiamu. These are all guys that have been around in this league for a little bit or have been playing spring football for a little bit. So if they were blackballing veterans based upon, because it's been, as what Mike Rapoli said, if you've been around here for 6 years, something's wrong. I think those comments were taken a little bit out of question, out of context as well. I think that it's not necessarily a blackball as much as it is like, okay, let's give this 23-year-old undrafted rookie linebacker a chance instead of bringing Frank Ginda back. Let's try to give these guys, if the league is truly going to lean into trying to get guys to the NFL until they start making money, that they can say, okay, now we can focus on this being a legitimate league of, we're going to build UFL stars, because that's what it feels like Mike Rapoli is trying to do. Like right now, we'll lean into the NFL thing, but as soon as that we start making money back or we start gaining traction with this is going to be a league that is going to be sustainable, where you can make a career for yourself. I feel like that they're just going to try to give these younger guys some opportunities, because it also builds those stars in spring football for longer. Like, what has Frank Ginda got, realistically, compared to a 23-year-old linebacker that could build a name for himself? You get 7-8 years out of the linebacker that's 23. You got 2 or 3 with Frank Ginda. Ricky Person, Xavier Valladay is a perfect example for DC. Valladay is 24, 25 years old. He is fairly younger. Pearson's been around for a little bit. So it kind of, I don't want to say blackballed. I feel like it's not the correct term. And yes, there's probably some coaches that may want to sign some of these guys to bring them in for character issues or a solidifying presence. But the league just may be like, we're going to give these guys a chance. Like, that's what this league is about. This is what the league has been about. So let's do it from this perspective. At least that's how I read the situation. But again, I don't want to take anything away from these players' experiences as well, because they may be reading it in a different manner where they feel like they're being blackballed.
That's fair. And I would say that, you have a good point there, that most of the guys that are coming out and saying things are older guys. Guy Harrod Johnson, I believe, was another guy who came out and said something about, being blackballed, and he's currently coaching right now and has basically retired. So, maybe there's some case there to be made as well for him. But the one guy, like I said, that kind of sticks out to me is Ricky Person. And when you look at Ricky Person, I take no credit for making this claim. I believe it was Dirty from the X-Fan show, or he was previously with the X-Fan show. I'm not sure what he's doing these days, but he pointed out that this could be an injury situation for Ricky Person, an injury situation. And when you look at his background, it's very likely that that's the case. I mean, dating all the way back to his freshman season at NC State, he had injuries. So, I mean, literally every year he was in college, or 3 of the seasons he was in college, he had some sort of injury and missed time. When he was in the pros with Baltimore, he was waived due to an undisclosed injury. In 2024, he was waived with an injury settlement in August with Seattle. And then in 2025, he suffered an injury with the Birmingham Stallions, and he missed, I believe, 2 games. So this is a guy who's missed a lot of time due to injury. It's very possible that he might have, say, some pending workman comp claims, which would mean that the league can't really sign him. So, I mean, in that case, I think there might be an extenuating reason with Ricky Person that maybe he doesn't want to admit is the reason. And it could be tough, but we've seen some of those situations have to just be resolved before a player can be signed again. And maybe that's all it is, and maybe there are coaches that really want to sign him because I think he's 26 years old. Like, he's still very young, but at the same time, I don't think coaches are actively, or the league is actively saying no to any player that they think is going to make the UFL more talented, or have the best possible players on the field. So, I mean, personally, I think you guys hit the nail on the head. I do think Rapoli would like to keep the league fairly young, and so some of these guys are, kind of getting pushed out or gently nudged toward retirement. But I don't think it's a situation where people are being told, hey, you can't sign that guy because he's 30 and we're going to instead go with this guy who's 23. I think they have to weigh each decision. And, is the 23-year-old really that much worse than the 30-year-old Ginda? And, you have to weigh those things out in this particular league as well. So I think you hit the nail on the head as well, Michael. Like, you want to build stars within the league. So you want the guy that's going to have multiple years with the team from a coaching perspective and from a league perspective to kind of build out those popular players within the league. But moving on to the last big piece of information in terms of league-wide information before we get into our game reviews and previews, the league has announced that they will be expanding to Oklahoma City. As we know, this is expanding upon their use of MLS facilities. Oklahoma City is actually building it's a expansion for 2028. I believe I said 2027 there, but they're building a new MLS stadium in Oklahoma City that will open up in 2028, and it looks like the UFL will be one of the first tenants in that new stadium. So what are you guys' thoughts on, first of all, the fact that they're going to be in a brand new stadium and the fact that the UFL is going to Oklahoma? Let's go to Michael first on this one.
Well, I actually am going to kind of compound this with another thing that Mike Rapoli said the other day on X, and I don't know if you guys caught it or if anybody caught it or not, but he mentioned that 10 teams in 2028, 12 teams in 2030. So he is on a very aggressive expansion process. He wants to get to 12 teams by 2030. That's the goal he wants. And the fact that he is willing to do that tells me that the markets that we currently have, despite the attendance issues, may be the markets that we're going to have. I don't think he's going to continue to want to move markets around. So if that's the case, we're going to be stuck with Houston and Dallas trying to find a way to get attendance issues worked out, which I think actually could be beneficial if they could find ways to put boots on the ground and get people in there to those two cities to really drum up knowledge that those teams exist. Orlando is another one that I think will eventually come around. I was looking at the Apollo's numbers. I made a mistake the other day of saying that the Storm home opener might have been one of the biggest crowds. The Apollo's averaged about 19,000. So Orlando definitely has a appeal for spring football. They've just been burned so often that I think that they're kind of hesitant. So I think as long as they keep Orlando and they keep Anthony Becht in Orlando, I think that will be fine. Oklahoma City is a brilliant choice. I mean, how many times, Sam, have we talked about, putting a team in the UFL, the XFL, the USFL, whatever it may have been, in Oklahoma City? Now, granted, they may not have had the ability to do so with certain stadiums, but the fact that this is a brand new stadium, it's a shared stadium that it's the soccer format, which is perfect for what this league needs. And the fact that they struck this deal before this arena or stadium is being built is perfect. It's perfect because it's going to give Oklahoma City something to build for now. It's a brand new team. He did not say it's a relocation. It's a brand new team. So this gives the opportunity for them to strike this deal. Now, I'm also going to say this as well. I think Boise is going to be the second team that he is going to announce for 2028 because they have a USL 1 team that has an arena or a stadium that they play in. The team is doing really, really well, and the fans are showing out for the support for that team. If Birmingham, this was a trial run for Birmingham to not be moved to Boise, he may still have connections and deals in place with Boise to be the next spot. The only thing that worries me about Boise is geographically. Again, St. Louis is there to kind of bridge that gap, so that's kind of nice, but it's a little further than some of the other teams in this case. So I'm wondering how the logistics will work out with that. But I would not be surprised to see Boise be the second team that's announced, just because of the new soccer team that they have over there, and they could probably strike a deal with the stadium to get the team in there as well. So. It looks like we may have lost Sam, TJ. So why don't we go ahead and just jump over to you and see what you have to say about this topic of Oklahoma City being the expansion, and maybe some touches a little bit based on the 2028 and the 2030 situations that Mike Rapoli mentioned on X as well.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. Oklahoma City it's one of those locations where they're not. I mean, you have the Thunder, and then after that, it's kind of like, what else do you have? It's not like going to, a Dallas area or a Houston area where it's already oversaturated with a ton of teams at the pro level and everything else. So I like Oklahoma City. I feel like personally they should name their team the Lightning. That way, when you go to OKC, you got the Thunder and Lightning. Hey, Mike Rapoli, I'm available. You can hire me. It's fine. The but I like it. I also like the aggressive approach. It's it's kind of like a combination, really. It's aggressive, the planning of it, but it's still spaced out a little bit with time, and I like it. I feel like it's the perfect amount because, especially, like you mentioned, if it's looking like, barring a major like revenue issue happens with one of these locations, they're probably going to stay in the locations for at least the foreseeable future. So it makes sense that if you're not going to move anybody, you're going to work on the fan bases, you're going to work on that there, and then introduce completely new teams to get up to that 10 to 12 mark over the next couple of years. That could be huge for the league. That's one of the biggest knocks on, the CFL. People like the CFL, but they're like, dude, it's been around for 100 years. They don't even have 10 teams. What are we doing here? So the UFL's nipping that in the butt really quick, already getting up to a higher number of teams because that's what people want to see. I do like it. I am kind of surprised that Canton isn't really being discussed too much, though, at least for the first round of expansion, just because they had a huge following there. I know when some of the hub games were played there, they had a big following. Everyone thought that they were going to get a team when they merged and came into the UFL, but instead they kind of just nixed this whole area, Pennsylvania and Ohio for teams here. But it is a possibility in the future to grow to because you've had in recent years the Stars, the Pittsburgh Maulers, you had a New York team, and then you had interest in Canton. I mean, right there, that's 4 teams. That's a division right there, and they're all within 3 to 4 states of each other. Not a lot of travel. I could see them expanding there if I had to guess. Obviously, a little selfish, definitely a homer call, but it would be pretty awesome to live right in the middle of a 4-team division.
Yeah, no, for sure. And and to be fair as well, like Canton, I think I think that even though they have the Columbus Aviators, I think Canton, um, I think they could still house a team. I don't think it would split Ohio, too much to take away from each other, too much competition in that area, and it would be a kind of like natural rivalry, right? You got the Columbus Aviators, and then the Canton whatevers, that would be the key, to have a nice little in-state rivalry there in Ohio, where you can see that happen. You see it happen with Cleveland and Cincinnati already. So like, you could do it with the two of the smaller cities that don't have the same sports teams, and you could have that interdivision rivalry there, and neither one of them is Cincinnati and Cleveland, right? So you don't have to worry about that standpoint. The Browns fans could be like, well, I claim the Aviators, or I claim Canton, and Cincinnati could be like, go Aviators, like whatever it may be. And you see it with Oklahoma City. Like, Oklahoma City makes sense because Oklahoma City is now going to be a natural rival with Dallas. It's already a built-in thing. It's like Texas and Oklahoma in college football. You can feed off of that. Houston kind of throws a little bit of a monkey wrench in there, but overall, who cares? But it just, that is the one thing that I think that this league is going to need, is to find some natural rivalries of some sort to kind of be put in there to allow them to kind of grow this, because you get the storylines. Like Orlando and St. Louis right now is a rivalry, but they're so far apart, and the only reason why it's a rivalry though is because of Anthony Becht, right? Like, that's the bridge gap there. But it's not like St. Louis and Kansas City. You don't have like a team in Kansas City as well, where honestly Kansas City wouldn't even be a bad spot, because between the population and everything, like you look at the KC Current, but if you do Kansas City, you're also now going into, unless you do it on the Missouri side of things, you're looking at competing with the Chiefs, right? So you got to try to, I think you have to try to find certain areas or locations that I think you can kind of just bridge this natural rivalry of sorts. Sam, welcome back. In case you didn't catch all of that, I don't know when you came in or if you're even back. It looked like you may have froze again. Yep, it looks like he froze again. So we'll let Sam get that figured out, and I'll catch him up when he gets back from doing whatever it is he's doing. But I don't know how you feel about that, DJ. I don't know if that's something that you've thought about or if it's something that you think could work. It's just as much as I love the centralization and stuff. Obviously, you don't want to put too many teams in one area either at the same time. But what do you think about Boise? Do you think Boise could work? I mean, I know they took Michigan out, which was a shocker to a lot of us, heading into the season. But do you think Boise could be a good little location for because of St. Louis kind of being that in between?
I think it would work. I think it would be good. Just like to your point, it would be a little bit of it would be right there with St. Louis. It would help with the natural rivalry, kind of based on location. I don't really have anything against personally any location really, except really two that we already have, which is Houston and Dallas, and that's because they're bringing down league attendance. I mean, it's but I I would absolutely love to see too. Like I mentioned before, kind of like a PA rivalry coming back because you had it with in the USFL with the Stars and the Maulers, and it was fun. It kind of brought that natural because in state Pennsylvania, there's a little bit of a rivalry with Eagles and Steelers fans because I mean the part that I live in, Eagles are televised every week, no matter what. They could be 1-10, they'll be televised. But the Steelers were never televised, even if they were 10-1, and it would always annoy me as growing up, right? But that's just a little fun in-state rivalry. I'd love to have that back, but no, I could definitely see Boise State working out if that is announced as another location. I would actually be ecstatic about that just because it would really work out for the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, welcome back, Sam. I hope. It looks like you may have frozen again. Sam's having all kinds of technical difficulties right now. Hopefully, we'll get him back at some point in time here. He keeps freezing, so I don't know how much of it he's hearing of any sort. So hopefully, we'll hear his thoughts on this. I don't have the itinerary or the plan in front of me, so I don't even know what else is on the topic for conversations here. But let's get into the games that are coming up. TJ, we'll move on to the prediction side of things and previews, and when Sam gets back, hopefully we'll get his comments if he can get his technical difficulties figured out as well. First and foremost, TJ, let's talk about let's give a little bit of what do you think about DTR's debut with Birmingham against DC, and we'll talk a little bit about the Battlehawks and Storm game because St. Louis almost gave that game away last night, and then we'll go into the predictions and previews. Just any thoughts that you had from those two games, that have already happened this weekend before we get to the next two games coming up.
Yeah, I mean, DTR, I thought like I said earlier, I thought he came in and he played pretty good for his first game. He had a couple turnovers, but also made a lot of good plays. Really brought life to that team that after getting shut out the week before, made them look a lot better. And DC is no slouch to on defense either. So I mean that's a real showing against one of the better defenses in the league. That okay, he definitely is an upgrade. Last night, man, I didn't know what to think. I turned the game on. I was hoping the score bug was wrong when I saw 0 at almost halftime, and I was like, maybe I don't want to catch the second half of this game. But I saw a stat line. It was like 29 or 39 total first half yards. And I was just like, man, the Orlando has not looked this bad this season. Uh, but credit to St. Louis, man. They were bringing it. They were making it hard for the offense to get anything going in the first half. Second half, though, halftime adjustments. They figured something out because Orlando, they came back. They started with the magic, got some turnovers, got the one blocked punt, returned to the 1 yard line or going out of bounds at the 1 yard line, set up obviously an easy first and goal scenario. I really thought I was like, man, they may come back. They fell just short, but you know what, man? First loss of the season, and they showed a lot of heart and a lot of just chip on their shoulder to try and get back in it. So you got to respect that. But congrats to the Battlehawks. They're back up. in the win column, and they got a hard-earned win in Orlando last night.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought that was a nice little comeback victory for them by all means. Sam, welcome back. I don't know how much of you caught. I don't know how much you were able to hear, if you were able to hear any of it, but basically, TJ and I basically spoke that, Boise, might be the second location picked. But we were talking about more of like with the expansion coming up for 2030 with the last two teams, or, even the last three teams that haven't been announced, because Boise isn't a guarantee. Um, we were talking a little bit about Canton, and Canton kind of being a good location because it brings an in-state rivalry with Columbus, and it's not Cincinnati and Cleveland. Um, we were talking a little bit about where some other locations could be that would be kind of like a natural, like, rivalry, because Oklahoma City coming in 2028 obviously brings the rivalry with Oklahoma and Texas, Dallas and Oklahoma City, because they're close in proximity. What other areas do you think that we could see possibly that might just kind of breathe a little bit off of this natural rivalry, or areas that you think that could work?
What about a team in Arkansas? I mean, I couldn't tell you a city right off the top of my head or anything like that, but I mean, obviously no NFL team there. Some college football rivalries you could play off of. So I think that would be an interesting location, especially if you could find a bigger metropolitan city that would support a stadium. And again, this is just off the top of my head. I have not done any research on this, so I don't even know if there's a viable venue for Arkansas. Um, but I think that would be a good location. Um, I'd like to say somewhere in Tennessee, but we've already done, Memphis, and that didn't work out too well. So I'm hesitant to say go back there. Uh, Man, although with Kentucky in the league now, it might have a little bit more viability there. Um,
I mean, Memphis was behind
that's
the eight
tough.
ball anyways, though. I mean, Memphis was a little
True.
bit behind the eight ball just because the USFL wasn't really in the market. Like, they just put a team there and just thought that would attract people in general, but they didn't even allow fans at the stadium, at that time. So I mean, when it finally came out, it was not really a surprise that it struggled a little bit, just because there was nothing building up to it at that point. So I'm not really surprised it struggled a little bit, that spot. So
Fair point. And I mean, honestly, that's the one thing that I don't know if you guys really spent much time discussing is like expansion's great. And I would love to see 12 teams by 2030. But I think what might be more important to the league or more important to the longevity of the league is putting teams in the markets at least during training camp, and not operating out of the hub model. And it's strictly for the fan engagement. During training camp, that's when you build up a lot of that fan base because you can have open practices, you can have fans in there, signing autographs or whatever after practice and stuff like that you can't necessarily do at games like you can, in some other sports. But um, I think that in my mind, that would be a bigger priority to me than m- getting to 12 teams by 2030. Although I understand the logic, expansion creates intrigue, which is going to open up more opportunities for fans to get involved in the league. And I think it's good for the league in the long run. But um, that would be my next question to anybody who are, a league official. Like, hey, when are we going to be in a market full time? Is that a part of the plan in general? Is that only going to be a part of the plan if we have team owners, or that would be a big question for me to answer. But I think I think there's a couple markets that you can put in there that logistically make travel make sense, and then also that uh, market wise make a lot of sense. And I think you know that might even come with like maybe a return to an old market, whether that's San Antonio or something like that. Who knows? But I could definitely see some former spring football markets coming back as well. But I think Boise's a great pick. Makes a lot of sense. Like we talked about before, I think Oklahoma's a great pick. I think you look at what the Tulsa Oilers have done there, and obviously Oklahoma likes their football. So I think
yeah.
that, a team, for the UFL is going to probably do pretty well as well. I mean, to my knowledge, Oklahoma weather isn't terrible in March, April, May. So I think you'll probably get a lot of fans out there at games. So I think that's a good market as well. So I will say this, and we've said this a lot on the show already. Whatever the plan is, I feel more confident that ownership gets it. They understand the fans a lot more now than they have in years past. So that to me is encouraging because I think it bodes well for the future.
Yeah, for sure. Another market that I was thinking of that could possibly be a team in Georgia, somewhere in Georgia. I think it'd be a natural rivalry for Orlando. I don't want to necessarily say Atlanta per se, but somewhere in Georgia, I think that you could. There's plenty of college stadiums in that area. I mean, soccer stadiums in that area that are used. So I'm sure you could strike a deal with Georgia as well to try to find a spot to play um, in that capacity as well. Sam, did you have anything else you want to add to the expansion side? Because I think we were going to move on just to predictions coming up and for the games that we are going to be in between our shows. So.
No, I'm good. We can definitely move on, and I apologize about my computer issues, and glad I could make it back to finish out the show with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's start with the first game today. The first game today is at 12 o'clock Eastern. It's going to be the Columbus Aviators traveling to Houston to take on the Gamblers. Both teams are 1-3. Neither team has looked spectacular, but Sam, you are our resident Columbus Aviator, so let's start with that game with you and see what your thoughts are on that one.
Well, neither of these teams have played very well as of late. I think Houston's found a little bit more momentum than Columbus maybe has. And Columbus got their first win and everything, but with the situation with Ted Ginn and just kind of everything that's been going on there with Columbus, it seems kind of like a little bit of a mess. So if I'm going with my gut, which is typically how I pick games, I got to pick the Gamblers in this one because I just think that whether it's the home field advantage, although we all know Houston's home field advantage is kind of iffy. Um, I think between the way that Houston's been playing and the way that Columbus has been playing, I'm probably leaning a little bit more towards Houston finding victory in this one. If I had to guess on score, and I'm probably way off to be honest, but probably somewhere in the 35 to 21 range, or maybe even 28 to 14 range. I see there being probably a 1-2 score gap between Houston and Columbus by the time the dust settles. Would love to see Columbus pick up a win here, but ultimately, I just think Houston at this point right now is probably the better team in this
All right, and TJ, what about you?
Sam, for shame, man. It's your team. Come on. I'm. You know what? I'm actually going the opposite. It's just Houston. The history that they have shown is they can surprise about 1 to 2 times a season, and one of those times this year is already up. So I'm thinking Columbus stacks another win up. I think it's going to be a closer one, maybe a little bit of a dogfight, but I think Columbus is going to pull it out in the end. Maybe a last second drive or something that'd be good for TV.
Yeah, I'm going with Columbus here too. I think the stability a little bit more at the quarterback position. I know that Talia is going to be starting again. I if Hunter Deckers was back, I think it might be a little bit different of a story because Deckers was playing really well before he got hurt. It was a couple missed throws, but overall he looked pretty solid. And defenses struggle a little bit more with left-handed quarterbacks that aren't. It's not as common, so you don't get it. The reads are a little bit different when you're playing defense, and I think that Deckers was able to exploit that before he got hurt. But with Tagovailoa there, I just don't know if it's going to be sufficient enough for Houston to overcome this. So I'm taking Columbus in this game. It's going to probably be close. I don't expect a ton of offense. Probably 20 to 18 range, somewhere in that range, and that might even be a little bit higher. I'm probably betting the under if I'm a betting man today. So But yeah, anyways, that's where I'm going with that game today for sure. The next game is tonight, this afternoon, I guess, 3 p.m. The Louisville Kings, with new quarterback, traveling to Dallas to take on the Renegades. 1-3 Louisville Kings taking on the 3-1 Dallas Renegades. Sam, what are your thoughts on this game, and where are you going with this one?
Well, obviously, the big question here is, how does the new quarterback adapt in Louisville? Obviously, we saw Jason Bean playing pretty well, so I think the offense can do it. Um, I'm curious to see how it all works out for them, though. I definitely, to be honest, I'm not even sure who's starting for them. Do we know for sure? Is it
I
Mike DeLulo?
I think it's Chandler Rogers is who they're going to go with. I
I
believe it's
think you're
Chandler
right.
Rogers.
I think now that you mentioned that, I do believe that that was posted up by the team page or something like that. So if it's Chandler Rogers, I feel a little bit more secure in the fact that Louisville might be able to come out and spark the offense. You at least know what you've got in him already. He's been there since the beginning of the season. Versus a guy like Mike DeLillo that comes in and literally is learning on the fly and trying to come in and start, which I don't think is an advantageous situation for anyone. I think that's why we didn't see Luis Perez start for St. Louis yesterday. I think you kind of give that guy some time to come in and learn. And maybe Chandler Rogers is just the guy, and that's why you moved on from Jason Bean. So um, while I don't see anybody beating Dallas currently, just because of how Austin Reed is playing, um, I'm very intrigued to see Louisville tonight, only because I want to see if their offense can find some rhythm here with a new quarterback. But in this game, I think it's hard to pick against Dallas. They're the home team. Austin Reed's been playing out of his mind. If he's not back in the NFL by next season, I don't know what the NFL is doing, quite frankly. But at the end of the day, I would like to see Louisville keep it competitive. I just don't know if they'll be able to yet.
TJ, what are your thoughts on this game, and how do you feel about? I mean, there is another quarterback on roster. It's N'Kosi Perry. I just don't know if he's, ready or if they're going to turn to him or not. But he has been there for a minute. But I think Chandler Rogers is going to be the starter. So, TJ, what are your thoughts on this game, and do you think Louisville is going to be able to keep it close with Dallas?
It might be close for the first quarter, but Dallas, man, they've with Reed in at quarterback, they become kind of like a little bit of an offensive juggernaut this season. We kind of got used to them seeing their offense more of a controlled long drive down the field. Occasionally Perez used to throw the long ball, make some big plays, but now Reed, man, he's just passing it all over the field. Uh, I look for Dallas to probably pull away towards around halftime, and in the second half, just kind of walk away with it. They're probably going to win by 2 touchdowns by the time it's all said and done. But again, uh, to like Sam said, I do want to see how Louisville does with their new additions, see if there is any improvement, things like that. But yeah, it's probably going to be Dallas by double digits.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's going to be Dallas by double digits. Though the Kings could surprise. Chandler Rogers was a very prolific college quarterback. He had a very good career. Bounced around a little bit from some colleges, but played fairly well enough to put up some pretty good numbers. So he has some talent. I just don't know if it's going to end up being a against this Dallas defense specifically. This Dallas defense is pretty good, so I fully expect Dallas to win this game probably pretty handily as well. Moving forward, the league did not do the Kings any favor. They have a Thursday night game next week. They open the season, open the week, and they're on a Thursday night game against the St. Louis Battlehawks as the Battlehawks come to town. St. Louis just got their first win on the road this year, beating Orlando, but they also get an extra day rest compared to Louisville. Sam, your thoughts on this one, and will that play a factor into the outcome of this game?
Well, I mean, anytime you draw the St. Louis Battlehawks, it's tough, especially when you're on a short week. Obviously, St. Louis already played this week, so they get the benefit of that extra day of rest. I guess it's a good thing it's a home game. And, Louisville can definitely lean on the fact that they have a very, very big presence at home, which is great to see, by the way. So I think, honestly, in this game, it's tough to say because obviously we haven't seen who's going to play quarterback and we haven't seen how they're going to do. But I'm going to give Louisville the edge. St. Louis definitely has not been blowing anybody out as of yet this season. Most of their wins have come fairly tight. So I think that bodes well for the home team in this situation, especially given, the advantage that I mentioned. So I'm going to lean Louisville in this one. It's a little bit of a risk, obviously, given the fact that we just don't know what's going to happen at the quarterback spot. But I think Louisville has a good shot in this game.
All right, Louisville. Sam's been contrarian on every pick so far, so let's see if TJ is going to follow that same logic.
You see this. It's Thursday night, short week. This is a classic trap game. With all the questions at quarterback, I too am going to pick Louisville at home in an upset night game.
Wow, TJ is getting revenge on St. Louis for defeating Orlando by picking the Kings next week. I'm picking St. Louis. I just with the Kings and the quarterback situation, and I know the quarterback isn't the see-all be-all, and Louisville has some dogs, and they do have a pretty solid team. They've been fairly competitive for the most part. I just don't see. The league didn't really do them any favors with the scheduling. You played the 3-1 Dallas Renegades on a Sunday, and then you got to take on the 3-2 St. Louis Battlehawks on Thursday night. It's a pretty brutal 2-week stretch there for Louisville, and I just don't think they have the team to quite overcome it. So I'm taking St. Louis in that game on Thursday. I hope Sam is keeping track of this because I'm not. So my apologies. If not, I'll try to remember it off memory. The next game that will happen before our next show is the flip this time. Houston will travel to Columbus to take on the Aviators. This is the part of the back-to-back scheduling that the league did this year, where there's some games that go back and back, where they play each other 2 weeks in a row, home and home. So Houston will travel to Columbus. Sam, what are your thoughts on this one? We got your thoughts for today. Does it change with Columbus at home?
Yes, it does. Yeah, I definitely have to give them a little bit more of an edge being at home. I don't know how much of one. I just have a little bit more faith in them winning in front of the home crowd. Man, that's a tough game though. That's tough. Just because, like I said, both teams have kind of been inconsistent. Columbus has found a way to win over the past couple weeks, but I still don't have a lot of faith in either team so far. So I guess in this case, I'm going to go with Columbus, but it's very, very hesitantly. Something like a 21-18 game, or I could see it being decided by a last-second field goal or something of the sort. But definitely don't have a lot of faith in this pick. But
Sam's
I'm
going
going to go
home
with
and home
Columbus.
series. He's taking both home teams to win both weeks. He's taking the Gamblers today and the Aviators next week. TJ, Friday Night Football, 8 p.m. on Fox. Gamblers, Aviators. Are you sticking with the Aviators for the second week in a row?
Yes, I will. Just like I said before, Houston, they've proven that they have trouble winning. And Columbus is a new team. They'll be at home. And I know even if Houston wins the first matchup, they're definitely not winning two in a row vis-a-vis. So that's not happening. So I feel like picking Columbus is the safe way to go in terms of guaranteeing at least one right pick, but especially at home too. If I think Columbus can do it on the road, they can definitely do it at home then. So I look for them to win both matchups.
My only X factor in this game is whether or not Hunter Deckers is going to be back. If Deckers plays, I feel like there's a good chance that Gamblers could probably sneak out a victory in this game, but I'm taking Columbus as well. I think Columbus will win back-to-back. I think they'll sweep the series with Houston, but Deckers will be a wild card because if he does play, there is a good chance Houston could surprise and win this game. I'm just not going to take him because I don't know the status of what Hunter is going to look like. I know that he's close, but him and Nolan are both close. Actually, to be honest with you, they're both very close to coming back. So either one of them would definitely make a difference, no offense to Talia by any means, but it hasn't been the same dynamic offense that we've seen or have seen flashes of with Hunter Deckers or Nolan under center. So there is a possibility that Houston could sneak out the second game. And the last game before next week's show, a possible UFL championship preview. The Dallas Renegades travel to DC to take on the Defenders in the Audi Field. Probably, most likely, both teams will be 4-1 going into that game. Sam, we'll start with you to close out our prediction segment here. What are your thoughts?
Well, ironically, this one's fairly easy for me. I'm going with DC at home, and I'm not trying to pick all the home teams, but in this particular game, I think I'd probably pick DC on the road as well. After the performance that Jordan Teamu had this past week, I mean, how can you bet against him? And honestly, he's probably, in my opinion, one of the few quarterbacks you can really say, I mean, outside of Austin Reed, that can really kind of elevate his team and beat any team in this league, in my opinion. So I think DC at home. Like I said, I think I'd probably pick DC if this was in Dallas. So I really think that they're gonna bring home a win on this one.
TJ, what are your thoughts on this game?
Hey man, it's going to be a good game. It definitely, if you're a betting man, I would recommend betting the over. Probably going to be a lot of points on the board. But you got to go with the defending champs at home, especially until they show you otherwise. And DC, man, they've lost a close game at the start of the season when the team looked absolutely terrible. Ever since then, they've been clicking on all cylinders and they've been owning games. So, got to go with DC at home, especially against the Renegades. I see it being a good game, a little bit of a barn burner. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if both teams score over 30, to be honest with you. I'm thinking it's going to be a classic showdown. DC 41, Renegades 31.
Oh, okay. Before I pick, because I can just tell you, I'm taking DC, but I think this game's going to be closer. Dallas's defense scares me. They're one of the better defenses in the league. But let me ask you a question. I want to pose this question to close out the show real quick, Sam, for you and TJ. You can answer as well. But we're talking about DC clicking on all cylinders from week one, and they look like they're the cream of the crop of the league this year so far from what we've seen. How much of this do you think is just attributed to the fact that they're the only team that has a coaching staff that's returned from last year?
That's tough. I mean, that's tough. Man,
with a lot of the same players still on the team. Fred Keiss has been around for a minute. Shannon Harris, it's people forget that Shannon Harris coached the entire season last year just because he had the interim tag. He was there from week one on.
And he was with the staff before that too, so it wasn't even like it was a real big change when he took over. I mean, it was, but most of the coordinators stayed and stuff like that. So, I mean, in that scenario, I think you're on to something there. I mean, obviously that's a distinct advantage, especially early on in the season. But we're also talking about a guy who went out and won the UFL championship last year.
Right.
So, I mean, in my opinion, he might just be a really good coach.
I think he's a fantastic coach. But I mean, I'm just saying in general, from a standpoint of just you take a look at the other teams, the struggles that they've had. Like DC, even with the defensive coordinator, Greg Williams stepped away, Blake Williams stepped right in. Father son. Fred Keiss left. And he came back, and he's been the staple on offense. Jordan Teamu returns. It's a lot of the same faces in DC, a lot of the same people with the same system for 2 years now, compared to some of these other teams, these other guys that are learning new systems. I think the league accidentally gave DC a little bit of an advantage on that front, not thinking, the long-term effects on stuff. TJ, what are your thoughts about that? I mean, is there an agreement there? Do you see it from a different perspective, or?
No, it's absolutely an advantage for them. I mean, consistency is key in any team sport, especially, and you mentioned it, not just the staff, but a lot of the core players as well came back. We talk about it a lot on the other show with certain indoor teams, constantly making changes and everything else. You can never get consistency. You can never get, most importantly, working experience with each other. Like last year, the bulk of this team was together. This year, they see something happens that you don't have to get nervous. You've experienced this before. You're looking at head coach, quarterback, and you're saying, "Oh yeah, remember last season when this happened?" Boom. The feeling of having that experience, not just in general, but with the specific team and people around you. That's a distinct advantage in any team sport, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so as well, for sure. I don't have anything else, guys. Sam, do you have anything you want to add? TJ, anything you want to add before we sign off here?
No, I think the one other thing that like we should probably keep an eye on, and we can save this as a discussion topic for next week, but currently, when you look at the standings, I think there's a pretty clear-cut distinction between the bottom teams and the top teams in terms of traits they share with their coaching staffs. We talked about it a little bit before the season, but right now, Louisville, Columbus, Houston, Birmingham, they all have one win apiece, and all of those teams share the fact. Well, sorry, Houston being the outlier, all of those teams have a first-year coach, and then St. Louis is the outlier in terms of the win department with a first-year coach, but they also have a first-year coach who had coached in that location previously. So a little bit of a caveat there, but something to keep an eye on moving forward. And we'll see if Kevin Sumlin can maybe help solidify that trait there that all those teams share. But no, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, honestly, I think we covered basically everything, and honestly, we even covered 3 of the games for next week. So I think you guys have a lot to digest. If you were watching today, thank you guys all for tuning in, and thank you guys for keeping it going while I was getting my computer situation figured out.
Oh, it's really easy when you have somebody who has hosted it before as well and whatnot. So we're all full of hosts on the show in some capacity. I do want to just echo your point about Houston real quick, and I'm going to say something that's probably in the minority of fans that have watched the UFL. I really don't think Houston would be this bad if they didn't have the injuries at quarterback. I don't think Houston would have one win. I think they would probably be in the 2 to 3 win range, honestly, if they didn't have such massive injuries at the QB spot. So,
No, that is a fair assessment, 100%. And honestly, that was something that I hadn't even really thought of factoring in. But yeah, when you consider that, yeah, Sumlin would have probably solidified that thought process even more. Maybe he grabs a couple more wins and things look a little bit different there. But you have a great point. Yeah, he's on his 3rd starting quarterback. He's had what, 5 total on the roster, if I'm not mistaken.
4, I think 4 total. Well, 5 total because Taluya wasn't really there. He came in later in the year, and then they signed Sam Castronova. Once Nolan Henderson got hurt. Yeah. So yeah, I mean they've had 5 total QBs on the roster. So exactly. I just feel like that the QB position. I mean, I'm not saying they would be 3-1 or anything along those lines, but at the very least they'd be 2-2. They'd have at least one more win. I feel like, if the QB position didn't have the injuries of that sort. So, yeah, I don't have anything else. I don't have anything else. So, Sam, TJ, thank you, viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in here at the UFL Central. Next week, same time, Sunday, 8 a.m. Eastern. What is that, 7 p.m. Central for you or whatever, or 7 a.m. Central, or 6 a.m. Central for you, Sam, because you're Mountain Time, right?
Yeah, 6 a.m. Mountain Time.
If you're in the Mountain Time, it's really early in the morning.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, it's
by all means. So, until next week.
All right. We'll catch you guys next week.
Until next week, enjoy the 2 games today. Enjoy the 3 games before our next show as well. And, yeah, I think that's going to do it. So long. Until next week.
Yo, what's good? Cedric, the bus driver here. I don't know about you guys, but I know what I will be doing every Tuesday, Saturday, and Sunday. And Thursday nights, too. I'll be over at ShadySports Network, so catch up with me. Holla at your boy.